The alarm tore through the hangar bay, before I even had my kit fully open, and my hands froze for half a second because something in that sound was wrong. Not the drill tone, not the calm, repeating chime we had been briefed to expect. This was sharp, uneven, real, and it meant a ship somewhere close to me was losing its air into open space. My name is Laura Bennett, and 3 hours earlier, a room full of cadets had been laughing at me. It started the moment I walked into the hangar and set my kit down on the steel bench. 41 pieces of hand tools, packed into a case that had belonged to my father before it belonged to me. Titanium casing, a strap gone soft with age, a serial number stamped by hand instead of printed by a machine. Nothing about it looked impressive next to the gear the other cadets carried. A tall cadet named Victor, copper-skinned and broad-shouldered, picked up my kit before I could stop him and turned it over like he was examining a fossil. "Is this a toolbox?" he said, loud enough for the whole bay to hear. "Did you wander in from a history exhibit, human?" The laughter rolled through the room fast, the way it always does when someone decides to make an example of another person. A dozen cadets, 6 different worlds represented among them, all fresh from orientation, all still convinced that the newest technology was the only technology worth respecting. "We have repair drones," Victor said, setting the kit down like it had lost its value simply by being touched. "We have swarms that can diagnose and fix a fault in 4 seconds. What does a bag of metal sticks do that a swarm cannot do faster and better?" I did not answer him. I had learned a long time ago that arguing with someone mid-laugh only gives them a longer laugh to enjoy. I picked my kit back up, checked the clasp, and said nothing. At the front of the bay stood our instructor, a calm, sharp-eyed woman named Priya Malhotra, arms folded, watching everything without a single word of her own. She had flown for the Compact for longer than most of us had been alive, and she had a way of watching a room that made you feel like she already knew how the day was going to end. "Cadet Bennett," she said, her voice even, not unkind, "you will get your chance to answer that question. Everyone in this room will." I did not know yet how soon that chance would come, or how much it would cost to prove. We were assigned to a joint exercise that afternoon aboard a retired transport ship called the Falcon Reach, stripped down and repurposed purely for training drills. The setup was simple. Somewhere in the ship, an instructor had planted a fault. Teams would split up, race to find it, and whoever solved it first would win the exercise. Standard training, nothing more, or so we believed. Victor led his team straight toward the reactor deck, confident, already treating the exercise like a formality. He deployed a full nanite swarm the moment he arrived, the kind of aggressive, high-density deployment meant to solve any problem in seconds and win bragging rights before anyone else even reached their assigned section. My team moved toward the life support trunk on the lower deck, because the fault log we had been given pointed us there, and because something about the whole setup nagged at me. It felt too clean, too easy, the kind of scenario an instructor builds when she wants cadets to learn a lesson they are not expecting. Then the real alarm sounded, cutting straight through the practice signal, and every cadet on that ship understood in the same instant that something had gone wrong that was never part of the plan. Here is what none of us knew yet. The Falcon Reach was old enough that microscopic fractures had formed along sections of her outer hull, fractures nobody had logged because nobody expected that ship to ever face real stress again. When Victor pushed his swarm to full density in the reactor bay, the sudden heavy draw on the ship's power grid created a vibration at exactly the wrong frequency. That vibration reached a weak section of hull, 3 decks away from where any drill fault had been placed. Metal that had been barely holding together simply gave way. Real air began venting into open space. Not simulated air, not a training scenario. A live breach, spreading fast enough that the ship's own systems predicted total loss of that entire section within 11 minutes. Worse, every nanite swarm aboard the ship, including the swarm meant to handle emergency repairs, was already committed to Victor's original task. Swarms do not notice when the world changes around them unless someone tells them clearly, and that kind of command needed to travel through a specific relay station, a relay station that now sat sealed behind the very bulkhead threatening to fail. Victor's voice came through the comms first, tight and higher than before, all the earlier confidence drained out of it. "The swarm will not respond to recall," he said. "Diagnostics say the relay is offline. I have no manual access from here. Every system on this ship assumes the swarm controller handles everything." That single sentence summed up an entire way of thinking. Everything assumes the swarm controller handles it. Nobody had built in a way to work around it, because nobody imagined a day it might fail. I was already moving before he finished speaking. The nearest access point to the breach location was an old physical junction box, bolted into the wall 3 decks below where I stood, the kind of equipment that predates a fully automated system by 100 years. No swarm was going to open that box. because no swarm understood there was any reason to. The automated network only recognized the fault it had been told about, not the real danger unfolding 2 decks away from it. I dropped to my knees at the panel, snapped my kit open, and let 3 years of practice take over my hands. A torque driver to loosen the housing bolts. A manual override key, an actual cut metal key, to unlock the failsafe built into that section a century ago by engineers who assumed one day their advanced systems might fail completely. A bypass clip stretched across 2 contact points to force the bulkhead to seal without waiting on a signal that was never going to arrive. 41 tools in that kit. I used 6 of them. The bulkhead ground shut with a heavy metallic groan, sealing the breach 14 seconds before that section would have lost pressure completely. It was not elegant. It was not instant the way a swarm repair might look on a screen, but it did not need a working relay, a functioning controller, or a signal traveling anywhere at all. It needed a steady hand, 1 metal key, and someone who understood exactly which bolts mattered. The real alarm cut off first. The drill signal, almost absurd by comparison, kept blaring for a few more seconds, until someone in the control room remembered to silence it too. Nobody was laughing anymore. Instructor Malhotra found me still kneeling by the panel, closing the clasp on my kit, my hands trembling now that there was finally a moment to notice they were shaking. She looked at the kit, then at the sealed bulkhead, then back at me, and for a long moment she said nothing at all. "Your father's kit," she said finally, not a question. "Yes," I answered. "He served during the Compact conflict, years before I was born. Then he was there the day the automated systems failed at Corvain Station," she said. "All at once. Every single one of them." I knew the story, because my father used to tell it to me the way other parents tell bedtime stories, which felt strange at the time but had stayed with me ever since. "A single corrupted update," I said, "pushed out to every automated system on that station at the same moment, because every system trusted the same authentication signature. Nothing broke physically. Everything smart broke together, all at once. 11,000 people were saved that day," she said, "by engineers who still remembered how to turn a valve by hand. Your people were mocked for a generation for carrying old tools nobody else wanted. We used to say your species does not trust its own machines. What we forgot is that a system depending entirely on itself has exactly one weakness: everything failing together, at the worst possible time." Victor stood at the edge of the group by then, quiet, his usual confidence completely gone. He did not say a word. He did not need to. Malhotra turned to address the entire bay, her voice carrying now with a weight it had not carried earlier in the day, back when the joke about my kit was still funny to everyone except me. "Each of you will be issued a kit like Cadet Bennett's before the end of this week," she said. "Physical tools, manual overrides. Not because your swarms, your drones, and your automated systems are wrong. They are remarkable, and you will rely on them constantly. And you should. But remarkable systems fail in remarkable ways, all together, at the exact moment you can least afford it. And when that moment comes, it will not matter how much processing power your ship carries. It will matter whether one person aboard still knows which bolts hold the whole structure together, and has hands steady enough to turn them." I stood up, slung the strap of my kit over my shoulder, and felt it settle into the same worn groove it always found, shaped years ago by hands that were not mine. Nobody laughed at my gear again, not that day, and as far as I ever heard, not after it either. What people did not see, in the moments right after the bulkhead sealed, was how close the whole exercise had come to becoming something none of us would have walked away from so easily. 11 minutes sounds like plenty of time until you are the one counting it down with your own heartbeat. I remember every second of that count, because each one carried the full weight of a mistake nobody had planned for. Later that evening, after the debrief, Victor found me alone near the mess hall, still holding a cup of something warm I had not actually tasted yet. He looked different from how he had looked that morning, quieter, less certain of himself in a way that seemed to sit uneasily on him. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I laughed at your kit because it looked outdated to me. I never once considered that outdated could also mean reliable." I appreciated him saying it, and I told him so, but I also told him something my father had told me long before I ever wore a cadet uniform. Technology is a tool built by people who cannot predict every failure. The moment you trust it completely, you stop preparing for the day it lets you down. He nodded slowly, turning that thought over the way people do when an idea lands somewhere deeper than they expected. A cadet named Nora, quiet through most of the day's chaos, joined us a moment later, carrying her own tray of food. She had been on my team during the exercise, the one who first noticed the real alarm cutting through the drill signal. "I keep thinking about how fast everything changed," she said. "One moment it was a training exercise, The next moment it was real, and none of the fancy systems around us understood the difference. That is exactly the lesson, I said. Machines follow the instructions they are given. They do not question whether the world around them has changed unless a person tells them so. That gap, however small it seems, is where real danger lives. Victor set his cup down and looked at me directly. How did you know to check the life support trunk first? He asked. The fault log pointed there, but so did 3 other locations on the ship. Instinct built from repetition, I told him. My father used to run me through scenarios like this since I was young, long before I understood why he pushed so hard. He said any system built entirely around convenience eventually forgets how to survive inconvenience. I did not fully understand him until today. The 3 of us sat together a while longer, talking through the exercise from start to finish, piecing together everything that had gone wrong and everything that had, by pure preparation rather than luck, gone right. By the end of that conversation, something had shifted between us, a kind of respect that had not existed that morning when a laugh at my expense filled an entire hangar bay. The following days brought changes across the training program that none of us expected so quickly. Instructor Malhotra kept her word. Kits nearly identical to mine were distributed to every cadet by the end of that week, along with new lessons built entirely around manual overrides, physical fail-safes, and the kind of slow, deliberate problem-solving that no swarm or automated system could replace when it truly mattered. Cadets who had once mocked anything that was not the newest, fastest piece of equipment started asking questions instead. How do you know which bolts control which systems? How do you train your hands to move without hesitation when the pressure is real instead of simulated? How do you stay calm counting down minutes that actually matter? I answered every question I could, not because I wanted credit, but because withholding what I knew felt like exactly the mistake that had almost cost an entire deck of that ship its air. Weeks later, during a far larger simulation involving multiple training vessels working together, another fault emerged, this time deliberately built to test whether the lessons from the Falcon Reach incident had actually taken hold. A cadet named Daniel, someone I barely knew before that day, calmly worked through a manual override procedure without a single moment of panic, exactly the way we had practiced. Watching him work reminded me of watching my own hands move weeks earlier, steady, certain, unwilling to freeze even when the stakes felt enormous. When the exercise ended, Instructor Malhotra gathered the full group one final time before assignments were handed out. She looked around at faces that had changed noticeably since that first day in the hangar, faces that no longer treated old, dependable tools as something to laugh at. You arrived here believing speed and power were the only measures of skill, she said. You believed the newest system was always the safest system. Today you proved to yourselves that safety is built from understanding, not simply from possessing advanced equipment. A tool is only as good as the person who knows how to use it when everything else has failed. I stood near the back of the group that day, my kit resting against my leg, its strap worn soft from years of use before it ever reached my hands. I thought about my father, about the stories he told me as a child that felt more like warnings than bedtime tales, about a station full of people saved by hands steady enough to turn a valve when every advanced system around them had gone silent at once. I thought about Victor's laugh in that hangar bay, and how quickly it had disappeared the moment real danger arrived. I thought about Nora's quiet realization that machines cannot question the world changing around them, and about Daniel calmly repeating lessons none of us had wanted to learn under such intense circumstances. Most of all, I thought about how close an ordinary training exercise had come to becoming something none of us could take back, and how a simple, old-fashioned kit of hand tools had been the only thing standing between that moment and disaster. Nobody in that program ever laughed at a kit like mine again. Instructors from other training divisions began requesting similar equipment for their own cadets after word of what happened aboard the Falcon Reach spread through the wider fleet. What started as an object of ridicule became, within a matter of weeks, one of the most respected pieces of equipment any cadet could carry. I still remember the exact weight of that kit resting on my shoulder as I walked out of the hangar that final day, the same weight my father had carried decades earlier, the same weight that had once been mocked and would now be issued to every cadet who hoped to survive a moment when everything modern and advanced went silent at the exact same time. Some lessons only become clear once the stakes are real. Some tools only earn respect once laughter turns into silence. And some people only understand the value of preparation once they have counted down 11 minutes with their own heartbeat, wondering whether steady hands and an old key would be enough to hold an entire world together. That day they were enough, and I have carried that lesson with me ever since, long after the laughter faded and long after the silence that followed taught every cadet in that hangar something no amount of advanced technology could have taught them on its own.